Today, we'll have one of HR Congress's very popular panel discussions on the subject of reimagining performance management, goals and results in the hybrid workplace. And you'll hear from a variety of speakers, so it's time for me to introduce you to them. Firstly, you'll hear from Alan Colquitt, independent consultant and advisor, affiliate research scientist at the Center for Effective Organizations at USC. Secondly, we'll hear from our very own Andrea Lagan, Betterworks Chief Operating Officer, and Isabelle de Wulf, Director of Talent and Organizational Development at Barco. We now have the panel. As a reminder, continue to submit your questions, which you're obviously doing anyway, which is great to see. Andrea just shared her 6 key steps that organizations can take to transition from traditional performance management to performance enablement, focusing on goals, conversations, feedback recognition. What elements have you seen work best in performance enablement programs, either in your organization or outside of your organization, and how has it worked?
Yeah, so we transitioned, or we started the transitioning from performance, very traditional performance management to performance enablement about 4 years ago. And I will not go into what we offered as tools or structure or the training on skills and how to give feedback, etc. But what I would like to highlight are 2 things. Is one, what Andrea talked about, is the change management. I think it's a lot about change management. So we started and taking the time to explain the why, not only to leadership, because you definitely need to buy in of all your stakeholders, executive leadership, but your employees as well. So explaining the why, the what's in it for me, what will improve in my work, in my professional life when we transition to performance enablement was key in our change process. So that is already one thing I would like to highlight. And the second thing I would like to highlight is something I saw in the chat as well, and is something that is really important to us as well. You can have the best tools, you can have the best training in how to do a feedback conversation, how to include good feedback in the flow of work, but you really need the right mindset, the right culture, not only in your employees, having a growth mindset, being open to receive feedback and to dare to ask feedback as well, but in your leadership as well. So if you have a more coaching leadership, if you have participative leadership, or leaders that are open to receive feedback or to give feedback, to learn from it, then you will be able to transform towards a performance enablement culture. So if you don't have that, you can have the best tools, the best structure, the best training in what is feedback and what are feedback models that we can use, but then you will kill your feedback enablement or your performance enablement. So you really need that growth mindset, not only in your employees, but in your leaders and your leadership as well.
Great, thank you, Isabelle. Alan, do you have anything to add to that? What have you seen work well in your career?
Okay, just to reinforce the point about change management that Isabelle made, I think the advantage that I had in a previous employer where I led this work, I think we had the advantage of being able to spend almost upwards of a year kind of socializing the organization, socializing the leadership team, kind of getting them exposed to these new ideas, getting them to confront their assumptions about what motivates people, because it takes a little bit of time to get them comfortable with these ideas. So it took a lot of time with change management, explaining what we were running toward, not what we were running away from. And my experience with kind of performance management is they love the new stuff. I love the flexibility, OKRs, more feedback, more touch points, more check-ins. All that sounds great. Once you start talking to them about abandoning ratings abandoning more individualistic performance programs. They start their claws dig in, and you drag them kicking and screaming away from it. So the more time you can spend on the things that they're going to really have trouble with, that really require different thinking, the better for sure. That's a key one. And to reinforce the point that Andrea made, in the research that we did, the most important differentiator of what people perceive as effective systems from ineffective systems was leadership sponsorship. They're using it. They're drinking the Kool-Aid. They're eating the same meal that you're eating, and they are modeling it. It was the most important factor for us.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, thanks, Alan. I think that will help. Some of the questions in the chat were around how you can really go about convincing leadership team that this is something that they should consider. So hopefully that gives some practical tips around that.
Well, even just one last point on Isabelle's point about if you have leaders that have a bit of an experimental mindset, they're willing to try things, then because people are terrified that if we move to focus more on organizational incentive programs like profit sharing, gain sharing, and so on, that people are going to quit working, that they're literally going to stop working because their individual performance is disconnected from their individual outcomes are disconnected from their individual efforts. And I think if they were to experiment a little bit, they would see that that's not the case, that people do continue to show up every day in environments where you don't have those programs. Yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you. And there was a question here. There's a lot of conversation in the chat around it seems like we're telling managers to take on more and do more. So how can we better equip managers to help employees? Is this a situation where they're going to have to be spending much more time if we're enabling them? Andrea, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I want to piggyback a little bit on what Isabelle was saying in the context of this question too. Enabling employees starts with connecting with them, and the connection that you enable between managers and employees, managers of all levels and employees, drives better engagement. It's not micromanagement. It helps people feel better that they are not being micromanaged, because it is an active participation between two people as opposed to a tops down management of stuff that has to be done, right? There is stuff that has to be done, but the way you think about getting that stuff done is conversational, it's regular, it's inclusive of what matters to me, what matters to you as the person that I'm engaging with. And, going back to the growth mindset, the thing that is great about a growth mindset is it's not like you have it or you don't, right? You can nurture people into a growth mindset. Now, some people might be more naturally inclined towards a growth mindset, but you can nurture people through regular connection, regular conversations into a growth mindset, or more of a growth mindset than maybe what, they originally had. And I think it's that connection and the transparency that comes from the regular connection that, enables the performance that you want to see in the organization.
Can I add something to that? Amy, you mentioned it's asking managers or leaders to do more. I'm not convinced of that. It's not always about asking them to do more, for instance, more conversations. It's sometimes about doing it differently than what they were used to do, how they were used to do it. So less directive and more in a coaching and an open conversation, asking input from their team. So it's not about doing more. It's about doing it differently.
Great, thank you. Yeah, there was a lot of chat about that, so I wanted to make sure that we touched upon it. A lot of comments around how we have different generations in the workforce of managers. So how can we really shift that mindset? Isabelle, do you have any kind of practical tips around how you've aligned managers on this in your organization?
Oh, spending a lot of time with them, not only by HR, but by peers. And we do feel that it's peer coaching and learning from each other in giving feedback or in changing your mindset or in accepting that there are no mistakes, there's only feedback, but taking a lot of time, a lot of putting people together, connecting people, whether it was pre-COVID or during COVID, we always tried to connect people, whether it was virtually or live, and making the time and the place to discuss and to show sometimes that it's not always so easy to do it. And yeah, following the, how do you say, the change and the learning curve of each individual. I think that is very important. And I think it was in the chat as well, is trying, and I know it's very abstract, it's trying to create a safe environment and psychological safety, even for leaders to learn and to say, now I have to question my own leadership style. I have done this my entire life differently, and now I have to change. And it's creating enough safety and trust to learn, to change, to try, to sometimes make mistakes, but to try over again. So
Great.
a lot of different things that we did, and perhaps too much to share here, because I think we will exceed the time that we have. But a lot of small things and taking the time to do so. It's not one little project that you launch and then you go to the next project. It's something that takes time, and that asks for your investment, not only as HR, of course, but of everybody.
Yeah. Great advice. Thank you, Isabelle. Last question for everybody before we get to the demo. What's one last piece of advice you can give to a HR leader and team that recognizes that their current processes aren't working and is looking to transform the way their businesses think of performance management? So Alan, perhaps we'll start with you on that one.
Yeah, I mean, I would echo kind of what I said earlier about run towards something, don't run away from something. So be thoughtful about what you're running toward and what this is a part of, and take the time to kind of reflect with people up front. Don't dive into action, dive into thinking about what our assumptions and beliefs are and what we want this process to do for us, and to really question what this process is doing for us now. And so I think that's really the key piece is to think before you act, and don't just trust your consultants. Don't just trust and don't be prisoner. I mean, I look at Betterworks. Don't be a prisoner to your large human capital system, because a lot of what people are using are being driven by is the handcuffs that they are in with their large human capital application, and refuse to be a prisoner to them. Find ways around them, find ways of adding technology on top that's better, because it is very much handcuffing most of us. So don't give up just because you have one.
Yeah. Thank you. Andrea, what advice would you give? You've just given loads of tips, so
I know for a long time here. I think I would summarize it into two things. Number one, really understand what the downstream consequences or negative consequences are for not making a change in your organization, and really being able to quantify them, because that also helps you understand what success looks like on the other side. And the second thing is, make sure you are partnering with an organization that really understands and can guide you through the massive change that this is within an organization. If you don't have somebody sitting there at the table with you, arm in arm, helping you really clarify how you're going to drive transformation with the leadership team that you have in your organization, and how that partner is going to be in lockstep with you driving that change. You want to make sure you have that very strong partnership. Underselling the massive amount of change that this is, and understanding what it takes to make it happen, I think is really important.
Great advice. And Isabelle, we'll finish with you.
Yes, very short. I think check the culture of your organization and the maturity level of your organization. Where are you today? Where would you like to, what would you like to achieve? And take some small steps. Sometimes you need to force and change the culture, but there's no one size fits all. I think you need to look into what kind of organization are we? Do we want to be or become? And how mature are we to change? And then start with what is there. Start, for instance, with your leadership or with your mindset, or creating a safe environment before going full blown with everything. So take small steps, but take it from the heart of your organization and what is the need of your organization and the people in your organization.
Thank you. Well, that brings us to the end of our panel discussion. I think we could keep going for another hour, especially with all of the questions that were in the chat. As I said, I've never seen so many questions, so we love to see it. Thank you so much, Andrea. Thank you, Isabelle, and thank you, Alan, for joining this panel discussion. It seems like everybody took a lot out of this conversation, so really appreciate your contributions.